Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 33rd episode of Sprynyl with Alex Spry, the show where I talk about my record collection. This is also the final episode of the Sprynyl Birthday Month Special. You may notice that I am not in the Riot Radio studio at Durham College. There has been a lot of technical issues that have made it not possible for me to do my show back at Durham College, so I decided that I'm going to make my own makeshift little studio thing and talk about the final album of the Sprynyl Birthday Month Special, which is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. So, let's kick this off right. I initially wanted to do this on June 25th, which is 2 days after my birthday. Also, thank you to everybody that wished me a happy birthday. I had a lovely time with a lot of the people that I love, lots of family and friends. It was such a good time. It just meant a lot to me, to those people that showed up and wished me a happy birthday. I feel the love and the support, and thank you very much for that. So, as you can also see, I also have a record holder, which you may have seen on my Sprynyl Instagram account. My best friend Madison got this custom made for me, so now I actually have a place to put my records, which is really, really cool. So shout out to my best friend Madison Harvey for getting me that. So, how this show works is my name is Alex Spry, and Sprynyl is a play on words of my last name and the thing that I collect the most, which is vinyl records. Sprynyl. Crazy. So in the first part, I like to talk about who the artist is and a little backstory on the album, just so you can get up to date on like who they are and like everything they've kind of done for music or in their own little band or by themselves, stuff like that, really. And then in the second part, I actually go into the track listing and talk about my personal analysis and everything that has to do with the physical media of vinyl records. And then in the third part, I like to wrap it up, give my final thoughts, tell you my favorite songs, and also just talk about what I'm doing next week. Which is, I don't know if it'll even be next week, but whenever I get to go into the studio again. I also want to apologize for any background noise you may hear. I have a cat, so sometimes he may meow, and I also live next to a very loud automotive garage. So keep that in mind, that we are not in a studio. I also live on Highway 35, too, so there's a lot of traffic that goes by. So, let's actually get into this, shall we? So, who are the Beatles? The Beatles are an English rock group that were formed in Liverpool in 1960. The members of the Beatles are John Lennon, Paul McCartney, George Harrison, and Ringo Starr, respectively. They are also known as the Fab Four. They have always been known as that. That is just what they are known as. They are credited as the most influential band in popular music. They were integral to the 1960s counterculture movement and recognition of popular music as an art form as well. It started off as a skiffle band, and they also were known for like their beat and 50s rock and roll, which is part of the reason why they are why they're called the Beatles, because they had beat to them, you know? They incorporated a lot of elements of classical music, traditional pop, folk, Indian music, psychedelia, and hard rock. There's just a lot going on. How do we mix up hard rock and classical music and also Indian music as well? There's so much variety in this band. It's just incredible. They revolutionized many aspects in the music industry. Which obviously with a lot of the elements of music and genres that they had within their music as well, which is really, really cool. It was led primarily by Lennon-McCartney, John Lennon and Paul McCartney, which is their songwriting duo name, kind of like Simon and Garfunkel, Paul Simon, Art Garfunkel. It is regarded as the greatest, best known, and most successful music collaborations ever by record sales and just in history in general. The band was evolved from John Lennon's group called the Quarrymen, which was known for playing in clubs in Liverpool and Hamburg, Germany as well. Funny thing about that is George Harrison was actually too young to play in one club in Hamburg, Germany, and he was kicked out of the country, or kicked out of a club or something like that because he was 15. It had the core trio of John Lennon, Paul McCartney, and George Harrison, along with Stuart Sutcliffe, which was John Lennon's friend at an art college, I believe. He played bass, and Pete Best was on drums before Ringo Starr joined in 1962 when they decided, hey, we're going to replace Pete Best with Ringo Starr, just because nothing against how Pete was playing, but more so how his humor fit in with the group, which was none at all. He didn't really get along with like the Beatles' quick wit and their sort of vibe, you know what I mean? They were managed by Brian Epstein, which they made a movie about him called The Midas Man last year. He found them at the Cavern Club when they were playing one night, and they were presented as what is known as the teddy boy look, which is like the leather jackets, the greased hair. That's what a teddy boy is, basically. And he decided that he wanted to give them a modest, clean cut to kind of make them seem so that more people kind of thought, oh, these are some nice-looking young men. I'm going to go listen to their records. That was kind of the vibe that Brian Epstein wanted to give for them, and it definitely worked because of how nice they look. That was a part of the reason why a lot of parents let their kids listen to them, especially with like how Elvis looked. A lot of their look in the early day was to look like Elvis because that was John Lennon's main influence. But yeah, it was a lot of the reason why Elvis Presley, like, he obviously was liked a lot, but hated by parents because of his look in that sort of regard. But then they did like the clean cut, and then a lot of parents were like, oh, this is good, I'm gonna let my children listen to that. George Martin produced and developed the recordings, and he is often regarded as the fifth Beatle just because of how much he actually played on a lot of the records and even like orchestrating a lot of their stuff, and it definitely helped with their popularity grow. So makes sense. Shout out to George Martin. Their popularity grew so much that the fan base frenzy called Beatlemania arose, which sparked more, a lot of their popularity sparked when their singles Please Please Me, From Me to You, She Loves You, I Want to Hold Your Hand were released. Beatlemania, I'm sure it's crazy that they even have like a name for it, right? Because like anytime like the Beatles were out or doing anything like that, like they couldn't go anywhere because the frenzy of girls was so massive. Like they would scream, they would try to touch them, like it was like insane behavior, like fangirl behavior, really. And what's so weird about it is when the Beatles went on tour, which I have the ticket stubs from their first American tour in 1964 here, it's been recorded that a lot of Beatles concerts smelled like urine because girls would literally be so excited and couldn't control themselves that they would literally like pee themselves at concert, which is insane. That's literally so crazy. By 1964, they led the British invasion, which like was a part of like the groups like the Kinks and all of them. I don't know who else. The Rolling Stones as well. The Who were a part of this British invasion who were so big, and then they made their way to the US, to Western culture and all that stuff. They made it when They led it when they appeared on the Ed Sullivan Show one night, and 73 million people ever watched the Beatles perform that, which I think at one point was like, I don't think it was like the most, but it was up there with how many, like the most watched thing that happened. Obviously the moon landing was probably the most popular at the time, but like it was definitely like probably up there in my opinion. I don't know though, don't quote me on that though. After they made a success, they made movies and merch and records, and they toured, but they were forced to stop touring because of how insane Beatlemania had become and how big the frenzy had become. And it was kind of a danger to themselves to even keep on touring because the fans would literally like go past security and would try to go on stage and try to touch them. And at one point there was also John Lennon had said something very controversial in 1966 when he said in an interview that the Beatles were bigger than Jesus. I'm sure everybody has heard that in lots of pop culture movements and stuff like that. Maybe in The Simpsons primarily, because there's a lot of Beatles references in The Simpsons for some reason. Yeah, there was like this thing, that comment upset many fans, and a lot of them burned records. And there was even at one of their live shows in Tokyo, their lives were threatened, saying "Do not come to Tokyo." So that was the main reason why they stopped touring as well. But when they stopped touring, that made them want to do more creative projects, like making albums like Revolver, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, the White Album, and what is mostly regarded as one of the greatest albums of all time with the greatest B-sides of all time, Abbey Road. The success of these albums started the album era in the 60s, which increased the use of psychedelic drugs and spirituality in the mainstream of pop culture as well. In 1968, they actually formed their own record label called Apple's Corpse. So they would use this to oversee their legacy and to just not be screwed over by the record company, because they were with Capitol Records at the time. But I think that they just wanted their own sort of thing to call their own, because that's their thing, and their legacy was so huge at the time already. They actually broke up in 1970. The four had very successful solo careers, and they would reunite a few times over the decades, but the four members would never actually reunite ever again, as John Lennon was murdered in 1980, and George Harrison died of lung cancer in 2001. Yeah, so they are the best-selling music act of all time after 60 years of them first uniting and becoming a band, and 50 years after they break up. They have sold 600 million units worldwide. That is crazy. Like, what a bizarre number. They are the most successful act in history of the U.S. Billboard charts. They have the most number one hits in the U.S. Billboard chart 100 on the Hot 100 chart with 20 number one hits. They hold the record for the most number one albums on the UK chart with 15, and the most singles sold in the UK with 21.9 million. They have won 8 Grammys, 4 Brit Awards, an Academy Award for Original Song for the 1970 documentary Let It Be, which was directed by Michael Lindsay Hogg, which is what Peter Jackson used his footage for his film Get Back, to kind of tell the story a little better. So that's cool. 15 Ivor Novello Awards. They were inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in 1988, the first year that they were able to be nominated for it. Each member has been inducted into the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame from 1994 to 2015, the last being Ringo. I believe the first one was John Lennon, actually, which is very interesting. In 2004 and 2011, they topped the Rolling Stones list of the greatest artists in history, and Time named them amongst the 20th century's 100 most important people of all time, because they have, obviously, because of their music and their influence in pop culture and just a lot of Western culture as well. So there's the Beatles for you, if you didn't know anything about the Beatles. So anyway, let's get into Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band from 1967. This was their 8th studio album, and the genres within this album are rock, pop, psychedelia, and art rock. It incorporates a lot of influences and sounds from vaudeville, circus, music hall, avant-garde, and Indian classical music. There is so much variety within this album. It is insane, and it makes sense why this is like such a huge stepping stone for a lot of music in the 60s and 70s and what was to come later in music. Avant-garde, for people that may not know what it is, because I think a lot of people say and they don't really know what it means, it implies that you're rejecting the status quo and you're being in favor of unique or original elements, which was definitely Paul McCartney's bread and butter. That was a lot of what he was into. I think that John Lennon was very avant-garde. I don't think in sound, I think in lyricism. So keep that in mind within this album as well. Indian music was another influence, saying, George Harrison actually has been quoted saying, "We can do things that please us without forming to the standard pop idea." So a lot of the Indian influence within this album, it was definitely, they popularized it and brought it to the Western culture of the US and all that. So that was very, very cool. And a part of the reason why there's a lot of Indian influence is when they took that break from touring in 1966, the four of them sort of went their own ways. Paul McCartney was going to start making the... Oh my gosh, sorry about that. That's my computer for you. But there was a lot of... he was going to do the soundtrack for a film called The Family Way, and it was very, very avant-garde, and that was very much the time in 1966, 1967 for London, England, and he really got entranced in that sort of sound. George Harrison went to India and did and sort of learned the ways of what they were doing down there, and he started learning Indian music and started playing the sitar and other Indian music. John Lennon was doing his own thing with art, and he actually met Yoko Ono during this time, and Ringo was just being a family man. Ringo was living his best life, like always, honestly. It was regarded as an early concept album. A lot of people consider this to be the first concept album, when that is not the case at all. There have been many concept albums before then, and there are better concept albums as well, as people like to say. I think a concept album, I should probably tell you, is that a concept album is just, there's an overriding theme within the album. So Pet Sounds is considered a concept album about love, heartbreak, falling in love with somebody, and then eventually falling out of love. What's Going On by Marvin Gaye, which is considered the greatest album of all time. It's about the Vietnam War, talking about that, really. And Bat Outta Hell by Meatloaf, that is a song about getting in a car crash and going to hell. That is literally the overriding concept of that. So the concept within this album is that the band that you see right here is not the Beatles. This is the Beatles' alter egos. This is Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. And there's different people within it, and it's just very interesting. And you can also see, I'll talk about the album cover later, but the Beatles, when they first started, are actually in the album cover itself, which is very interesting. There's a lot of, Paul suggested that they wanted to represent themselves as a fictional band and alter ego, which is what this is, obviously. And they actually were considering just changing their name entirely, but Paul was just like, no, let's just do this instead, because they wanted to steer away from like that good boy, like pop, sort of poppy sounding boy band thing that they were doing. George Martin said, their producer, that the idea in the beginning, it was never the idea in the beginning, but it gave the album a life of its own. And that's definitely what you can hear within this album, is there's so much life to it. It almost feels like you're like in a different world when you hear it. A lot of psychedelia and a lot of avant-garde stuff. I keep saying that, but that's just the truth. There's also a lot of influence, I said this before, of avant-garde, a lot of Indian music, a lot of circus music, vaudeville especially, but there's also a lot of influence of blues and Motown. And that was especially, there was a lot, if it weren't for, I should probably mention this before, that if it weren't for the Beach Boys, this album would not exist today. I'm just going to let that sit there for people that don't know. A lot of people think that there was a rivalry between the Rolling Stones and the Beatles, when that was not the case at all. A lot of the rivalry was between the Beach Boys and the Beatles, actually, which is very interesting. But basically, the Beatles made Rubber Soul in 1965, I believe. Yeah, they made that, and that influenced Brian Wilson of the Beach Boys to create Pet Sounds, which is regarded as the greatest album of all time as well. And Paul McCartney heard this, and he was just like, wow, like, this is incredible. A lot of the sounds from Pet Sounds, funny, the Pet Sounds from Pet Sounds, it influenced Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band. When Brian Wilson heard Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, he had a breakdown. He had a mental breakdown when he heard this album. And he wanted to create what is considered the Teenage Symphony to God, which was Smile. Smile by the Beach Boys. Paul was impressed by the harmonic structures and the instrument choices of Pet Sounds, which obviously encouraged him to want to push that even further with the Beatles, which is just so awesome. I love that these two creative geniuses that were born 2 days apart, both Geminis, both literally born the same year, they're both the same age, and from two different parts of the world too. They both like saw these two different art forms and were like, I could do better than this. Well, not even just better, but like they pushed themselves so hard to do that. You know what I mean? Like, it's just so cool. But yeah, another influence within this album was the album Freak Out by the Mothers of Invention, which was their inspiration to even want to do a concept album. Their previous album, the Beatles' previous album, Revolver, was a huge stepping stone with a lot of the technological experiments, and that was obviously continued on with Sgt. Pepper. I, however, would consider Rubber Soul and Revolver to be like a Volume 1 and Volume 2 album, which is exactly what George Harrison even said as well. So that's very interesting. The release of Sgt. Pepper's was a defining moment in pop culture, and it was released a couple months before The Summer of Love. It was released in May of 1967, so The Summer of Love was just around the corner. It was the first Beatles album to be released with the same track listing in both the UK and the US, which was very helpful for it to be as big as it was. I think that it would have been big irregardless of if it didn't have the same track listing, because there was this weird thing where like all the early albums of the Beatles, there was a US release and a UK release, so like none of the track listing were the same. It was just really weird that this was the first one out of all of them to have the same track listing. It spent 27 weeks at number 1 on the charts in the UK. It was 15 weeks at number 1 on the Billboard Top LPs chart in the US. It won 4 Grammys, including Album of the Year. And in 2003, it was inducted into the National Recording Registry by the Library of Congress. Excuse me. It has topped several critics for the best album of all time, including works published by the Rolling Stones magazine. It has sold more than 32 million copies worldwide as of 2011, and it remains one of the best-selling albums of all time, and way back. It remains one of the best-selling albums of all time, and when it turned 50 years old, it got number 1 again on the charts again. So yeah, I feel like this album has such like an old-timey sound to it. It just sounds so London. It's so old sounding, but like in the best way possible, if that even makes sense. So, coming up after the break, we're going to talk about the story of when I bought this album, everything included in the album, and talk about the songs off the album. Don't forget that you can follow us on social media at DCSA Media Hub. You can follow me on Instagram at Alex Spry, and this show on Sprynyl at Sprynyl. So, coming back, we're going to talk about this bad boy. There's no music breaks, because we're not on Riot Radio. But, yeah. Welcome back to Sprynyl with Alex Spry, where I am filming in my living room for the finale of the Sprynyl Birthday Month Special. This is the second part of the show where I tell you the story of when I bought this record, showing off the album, and just giving you my personal analysis of the songs. So, here we have, oh my god, here we have my Sgt. Pepper album. Heck yeah. So, like you can see here, you have the actual band here, and then you have, I'm just going to adjust this, oh my gosh, and then you have, like, all these people that were a huge influence of the Beatles, or just some of the members at the time. Like, as you can see, there's the original, like I guess, like, the early day Beatles here. You have Edgar Allan Poe, there's Marilyn Monroe right there. I don't think I know. Oh, Chubby Checker, I think is... No, not Chubby Checker. What's his name? I don't remember his stupid name. Bob Dylan is also here, because of course he is. I think there's a bunch of, like, people from, like, their school days and stuff like that. Because I think that's Stuart Sutcliffe right there. I could be completely wrong, by the way. So yeah, they all have their Sgt. Pepper uniforms. And there was, like, a running theory back in 1967, and still today, that Paul McCartney is dead. Paul is dead theory, and how he died in a car crash, and they replaced him with a lookalike named Billy Shears. This is a real thing that people think is real. And a thing that really makes people question that is because there's like a bed right here, which looks like the Hofner bass, which is what Paul McCartney played in the Beatles and still does today. And also on the back here is the lyrics sheet here, which this was the first ever album to ever do this, was to have, like, the lyrics on the back here. And also on the back you see the 4 lads, and Paul McCartney is the only one standing not towards the camera. So that's why people think that the Beatles, why Paul McCartney was dead. And this is also a gatefold of the lads. So what's really cool about Paul's suit specifically is that there's an OPP badge, which is so weird. Like, there's a Canadian thing on here. Like, that's just so funny to me. So the thing that was included in this album, which was really interesting and really innovative, and why this started the album era in the 60s, was there's actually cardboard cutouts of like, so that you can have like your own mustache like the Beatles. You can have like a Pepper like sort of like uniform or whatever, so that you can be a part of Sgt. Pepper, which is really, really interesting actually. So yeah, I have the actual record here too. I just took it out of the plastic today so that this looks a little better on camera. But yeah, Paraphone Records. But yeah, my mother actually bought me this record, a part of a Beatles mono box set actually, and she bought it forever, like I think 10 years now, I think, and I actually had the mono box set before I actually had a record player, which is very interesting actually. But yeah, the mono box set altogether, it had every single Beatles record except for except for the Yellow Submarine soundtrack. It had like the Past Masters and all that stuff in there. It came out to about $300 at the time, and on Discogs, which is a place where you can buy and categorize all your records, it is selling for over $2,000 on Discogs, which is insane. So yeah, it's all the Beatles records in mono, which is really interesting. So it's really cool, and I'm really happy I have it, because I got to have all the Beatles stuff all together, and I wasn't buying it like out of like random like new pressings, old pressings, whatever. So yeah, it's really cool. I also completely forgot to show off my cool Beatles stuff. This is a authentic Beatles shirt from Liverpool, England, that my dear, lovely friend Sharon Overend got for me when she was in Liverpool, and I thank her with all my heart. Thank you so much for this shirt. It's so freaking cool. I've also got this Beatles brick from the Cavern Club. It's authentic. There's like an actual piece of paper inside that actually shows you that it is like a part of the Cavern Club. And also, I have these Beatles Sgt. Pepper playing cards of Paul McCartney's Beatles Sgt. Pepper suit. So, there's that cool stuff. And I also won these ticket stubs in a auction. So, that's really cool, actually. So, yeah, there's that. So, the real reason why I got into the Beatles, which is really interesting, because I didn't just get into them a couple of years ago. I have been a Beatles fan since I was 6 years old, when I saw my mother play the Beatles rock band, because my mother loves rock band, and the Beatles one was like the only one she didn't have, and so she was playing it the one day. And she literally only got it because she has every single rock band and every single Guitar Hero. So she was playing it the one day, and I said, oh, like, what is this? This looks really cool and interesting. She's like, it's the Beatles rock band. Do you want to play? And I said, yes. And the rest is history. Yeah, I've been a huge Beatles fan ever since. I've seen Paul McCartney 4 times in concert. I've seen many Beatles tribute bands. In fact, I'm seeing a Beatles tribute band in Fenland Falls at the Grove Theatre on the 17th of July, and I'm very, very excited for it. I've seen Ringo Starr twice, which has been phenomenal. Yeah, this has just been my whole life. I used to own a Beatles fan page on Instagram, which used to have a very big following. So if you were a Beatles fan back in like 2015, around that sort of area, and you followed paul.maca4, that's me. That was me. And I lost the password again in that account, so now it's just like a phantom of the past, which is very interesting. So yeah, the Beatles mean a lot to me, and they shaped me into who I am today. So thank you so much for that. In fact, my main goal is to blow up. No, I'm kidding. My main goal in life is to be a radio personality on the Beatles channel on SiriusXM. So dream big. Yeah. So anyway, let's get into this track listing here. So Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band, and alongside of it, which I'm going to add for the very first time on this show, having 2 songs mixed together on here with A Little Help from My Friends. It is probably one of the greatest intros of all time to an album, I would think, ever. I love how in the very beginning it's like chatter, like of an audience waiting for a band to set up, and like it's like the tuning of the instruments. It's almost like it's their alter egos are gearing up for the show. And actually, what's really interesting about the tuning up at the beginning of this song is that it's actual recordings of the orchestra from the A Day in the Life sessions, which is the last song off this album, actually. So it's cool how it goes full circle like that. How, like, oh my gosh, like, it literally is full circle, because at the end, it's the instruments warming up, and at the beginning, it's the instruments, like, kind of doing their thing. It's just so cool. The name of the song actually came from Paul McCartney and Mal Evans, who was the Beatles' roadie manager. They were on a flight from Kenya, and Mal Evans asked Paul McCartney, "Hey, what does S&P mean on the shakers or whatever, on the meal trays?" And Paul McCartney, I believe he said that, and then like Mal was like salt and pepper, and then Paul thought he said Sergeant Pepper, which is just so crazy. I like how it's literally their alter egos introducing themselves to you. So let me introduce to you the one and only, the act you've known for all these years. It is the act you've known for all these years. They've just been hiding their alter egos this whole time. The horn quartet is so fantastic. I used to play trumpet like in high school, and every time I hear brass, I start crying my eyes out. I don't know why. I just have such a deep appreciation for the sound of horns. I don't know why. That's just who I am. I think it's so cool. I love how people are like carrying on and they're laughing and they're like applauding the horns. It's just so good. It's so good. I love how the song and the album is so self-aware, because with the lines, "We hope you will enjoy the show." Like, have you ever seen an album be so self-aware of itself? Like, that's so interesting. How is that even possible? You don't hear things like that unless they're like comedy albums, like with Weird Al or with Bo Burnham even. Like, that's just really interesting. I love how Paul is singing with the guitar solo in the background. Like, that's not really heard of. I feel like that's kind of like so foreign at the time. Avant-garde, would you say? Exactly. Especially with like the horn solo, it's just really cool. And like, especially with the line, "So let me introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears." Nobody knows who Billy Shears is before this point. Who is Billy Shears, and are we going to find out? Who is he introducing us to? And I love how right before the song ends, you hear cheering, and it sounds very reminiscent of Beatlemania, girls screaming. I don't know if that's actually true clips of the girls screaming during Beatlemania, but it's almost like they're leaving that sort of space, and then with a little help from my friend starts playing. And then we find out, we hear the vocals, who Billy Shears is. Billy Shears is no one else other than Ringo Starr. Which is just so funny that that's his alter ego. He is Billy Shears. I think that this is probably one of Ringo's best songs of all time. It's so simple, with just a simple bass and drum track, which is just so freaking cool. I really love that he says, "Lend me your ears and I'll sing you a song." It's like we're going back to the beginning of Sgt. Pepper, saying, "And let me introduce to you the one and only Billy Shears," sort of thing. Like, he's gonna sing us a song. I love how it's a call and response song as well, with "Do you need anybody?" Ringo responding, I need somebody to love. Could it be anybody? I want somebody to love. It's just so freaking easy. It's so simple, but it works so freaking well. The harmonies are so Beatles coded, obviously, but I feel like this is such like a prominent Beatles track, which is so crazy because it's just a Ringo track. Anyway, it's so full of life, and it's so full of color, and it's just so good. It's like a new era, which obviously it is, but like, oh my gosh, it's so good. "Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." I love how the Lowry organ, whatever the organ was that Paul was playing, it just sticks out so well. Like, that is so freaking Beatles sounding. That is true Beatles sounding to me, more than anything else. Obviously, because it's a Beatles song, but like, seriously, that is so Beatles to me. Oh my gosh. That's all I think of when I hear this song, is just that organ. That's all I think of. And it's so unique. It's so different. You don't ever hear that. Obviously, the organ was like really coming in, especially with like the Doors, especially. I feel like the organ is definitely given, like, that is like the trademark Doors sound. I feel like they really like got the organ though for this song, and that's really amazing. There's many rumors about this song being about LSD trips, especially the acronym of this song being Lucy, L, Skies, S, Diamonds, D, when that's not the case at all. It's literally a drawing that John Lennon's son Julian Lennon made in daycare, And he said, "This is Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds." And it's very psychedelic, very, very, very psychedelic. And they also had Elton John also covered this song, which I don't think is very good. And I'm going to be very controversial here and say that I don't like Beatles covers. I don't think they should be made. I think the only person that is good at making Beatles covers, and who is unfortunately not here with us today, is John Denver. He is the greatest. Like, he has so many Beatles covers. Like, check them out on Spotify and Apple Music. There's so many of them, and they're so freaking good. I love how soft it gets until we get into the chorus, which I would consider to be kind of like an orgasm, or maybe even when you're like tripping out, maybe. But it's just so good. I love the harmonies between Paul and John. It's like they were meant to do that forever, and it's just so good. A lot of the song's lyrics were drawn inspiration by the Alice in Wonderland book, so that was really cool too. I would say, I said this before, how avant-garde and how unique Paul McCartney was with his sounds and like his like musicscapes and all that stuff. I would say that John Lennon is very avant-garde with his lyricism, and that is very, very strong within Lucy in the Sky with Diamonds. Cellophane flowers of yellow and green look towering over your head. Picture yourself on a train in a station with plasticine porters and looking glass tiles. Like, what does that even mean? It's just so crazy. It's so fantastical, and it's odd, and that's just so Lennon. This is probably John Lennon's greatest works, and that's probably really controversial, and I just think that that's the truth. Getting better. The repetitive guitar part at the beginning is like very crucial, and I think that is just the whole song. It's so nice. I would say maybe people like, it's kind of like a marching song if you think about it too, especially with like that snare almost being like to the beat of like a march or something like that. It's almost like it's starting a new pattern in a way, because it's getting better all the time. We're sticking to this pattern and everything's getting better, and it's okay, and it's following a steady rhythm. And it's just about a man describing that everything is getting better since this girl has been his, since you've been mine. Yeah, that's all I think of. It's a very cheery and happy song. And then it cuts to the bridge, and then all of a sudden everything gets kind of different, and there's like Indian instruments being used in this. Actually, there's a tambura and there's congas in it, and it's so like eerie. Not like eerie, but it's like definitely strange, and I like that it's strange. And especially with it follows up with the line saying, "I used to be cruel to my woman, I beat her and kept her apart from the things that she loved." And that was John Lennon's lyrics that he added onto this. And that was what was so fantastic and so crucial, a part of the Lennon-McCartney song duo, is that Paul was always the one to be like, "Oh, everything's great, everything's awesome," and then John always saying about, "Oh, well, it could be worse." It's probably going to get worse soon. And I just think that that's like so big, like that's such yin and yang of John and Paul to do that. So, and I don't even think they realize that they did that. I know Paul McCartney is very much aware of that. Whether John Lennon thought that, we'll never know. Fixing a Hole. This is so, I love the harpsichord in the beginning of this. It's very, very Pet Sounds, but also very old school, very vaudeville, which is so cool. I love the word vaudeville, by the way. I wish I would say that more, but there's not a lot of albums or songs that talk about vaudeville, so this is the only one. It's so beautiful. It's almost like the collision of two worlds, with the old-timey vaudeville piano meets the electric guitar solo in the middle of it. It's actually considered to be Baroque pop, actually, which is very, very interesting. And I think I've talked about another album before that was Baroque pop, but I cannot. Oh, it was Boston, actually. Boston's debut album, which you can listen to on Spotify, too. People often speculated that this song was about heroin, but Paul said that it's an ode to pot, which is pretty right. I think a lot of Paul's songs were an ode to pot, really. Paul has also said that it's an analogy about putting up on makeup. You're fixing a hole where the rain gets in and stops your mind from wandering, because you're wandering thinking, "Oh, how do I look? How's my makeup like? I look ugly. I need to fix this hole in my face. Start putting cement on my face in a way to make myself look a little better, not so rough around the edges," sort of thing. But yeah. It's also about how people would, he would like, there'd be people outside of Paul's house that would want to come in and like just see what he's doing, and how he doesn't agree with it. And he goes, "See the people standing there who disagree and never win and wonder why they don't get in my door." like, what are you people doing sort of thing. And what's really cool is that Jeff Lynne, the lead singer, lead everything of the band ELO, Electric Light Orchestra, he used the song title for a line in his song Evil Woman. There's a hole in my head where the rain gets in, because he's a huge Beatles fan, which is really, really cool. I really, like I said before, the vaudeville piano with the electric guitar is like so insane. I can't even imagine being in 1967 and hearing that for the first time, because I consider it freaking insane in 2025. She's Leaving Home. This is probably one of the most beautiful sounding songs, I think, on this whole album, especially since it's Baroque pop and orchestra pop as well, which is so crazy, coming especially when there's like Indian classical music, vaudeville, circus. Now there's orchestra pop and Baroque pop. Like, what is like such a like collision of worlds. It's just so cool. The song was actually made when Paul was looking at the paper and he found this story about this woman named Melanie Coe. That's her real name, who ran away from her family and was looking for her. So he took inspiration from that and made She's Leaving Home, which is probably the most beautiful songs I think ever. And I love songs that have storytelling in them, and this is definitely one of them. Wednesday morning at 5 o'clock, as the day begins. And then Friday morning at 9 o'clock, she's far away. She's leaving home. It's so cool. And what's really interesting and really shows that everyone is always connected is that these two people, Melanie Coe, the girl that She's Leaving Home was written about, and Paul McCartney have met each other before, like 3 years earlier, when he chose her as the prize winner in a dancing competition on ITV's Ready, Steady, Go. Mind is blown. It's just so crazy. I just can't even believe it. And I'm pretty sure that George and Ringo weren't actually present for this recording. And the harp is just so beautiful in this. The harp is so beautiful, and like those strings, they are so deep. They are so heavy, and they're just so integral to this song. And it's just so beautiful. You don't hear harp ever. It's so nice. But yeah, John and Paul are singing in this, and I like how they sing like opposite of each other. How like Paul is singing She's Leaving Home, and John's like, what could we do that was wrong? Never have thought it was wrong. Like stuff like that. And it's really cool, and it's kind of reminiscent of A Hard Day's Night, because they did a call and response thing together too. And you don't hear that in bands ever, which sucks. And I think that we should really bring that back in bands as well, and not just have people harmonizing, people having like their own select parts and songs. I think that's really cool. Anyway, Paul used another arranger instead of George Martin for the orchestra, and George Martin was really offended by that, but Paul just wanted to get the orchestra done, and it was really nice. It was really, really cool. And I just think that I love when like strings are plucked on harps. Obviously that's how you play it, duh. But I mean like the strings as well, like for like violins and cellos and all that. I think that is like the most beautiful sound ever created. And that's what's very present in this song too. Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite. This is probably one of my favorite songs off this album of all time. It is like in my top 3 of my favorite songs off this record. The lyrics come from a 19th century circus poster from Pablo Fanke's, which is referenced in this song as well with the lyrics. It's from Pablo Fanke's Circus Royal Appearance at Rockdale, which is crazy. All of the lyrics from this, like if you look at the original poster, which there's so many of them online that you can just buy, all of the lyrics are literally on there. Like it just it was there. It was written for them. It was written by Paul and John. It was just there. They didn't even have to really think of anything. It was banned by the BBC, actually, because they thought it was about heroin, but Lennon denied that it was. I think that the BBC just tries to find reasons to be mad. Seriously. But yeah, Lennon had bought the poster when they were looking at antique shops while filming the music video for Strawberry Fields Forever, which is its own, it needs to be its own, like, Sprynyl video all on its own. Maybe I should do that one day. But it's probably one of the most complex songs on the album, with overdubs done on multiple occasions of harmonicas, guitars, organs, and sound effects. It's just so freaking cool. I love how there's such a carnival atmosphere, which is exactly what John Lennon wanted as well. And he told George Martin that he wanted to smell the sawdust on the floor. What does that mean? Seriously. But yeah, there were also multiple, if you can definitely hear them in the song, there's multiple recordings of fairgrounds and Calliope music, and there was also these were also like spliced up as well, and in the middle 8 bars, and Martin was also playing the Hammond organ and speeding up to achieve the carnival atmosphere for this song, which is probably why I love it, because it's so whimsy and so beautiful as well. Within You, Without You. This is the first song off side B, which is insane, because this has already been such a crazy side A so far with all the stuff that's been going on, and then it starts off with like this like a bunch of like stringed instruments from India, which I think like if people in like in 1967 heard it, they would have been like, what the frig am I listening to? But now I hear it and I'm like, this is probably like one of the most beautiful like instrument-wise written pieces of all time. And it was written by George Harrison, and it's heavily inspired by his stay in India in 1964. It features instruments like the tambura, the dilruba, and the tabla. And this song is considered to be the departure in the Beatles' older music. But I kind of disagree with that. I would say that Tomorrow Never Knows off of the Revolver album was the departure of the Beatles' old music, and people consider that to be the beginning of a new era with the Beatles. It's kind of crazy that people consider this to be the beginning, when that's not the case at all. It has a lot of Indian philosophy within its lyrics. It also brought Indian classical to a new audience in the West, which is really amazing, and it contributed to the genre's peak in popularity. There's one lyric that has always stuck out to me within this whole song, and maybe this whole album especially, and I think probably one of the most beautiful lines and lyrics I've ever heard in my life, which is, try to realize it's all within yourself, no one else can make you change. Because there's so many people out there that are like, oh, this person made me do it, this person made me do it, I was forced to do that. You were not forced to do anything. Nobody makes you do things. You do it to yourself. No one else can make you change. It's all within yourself that you do the things that you do. And I don't think people realize that. It's all within yourself. No one else can make you change. And I'm going to let you sit with that for a second. I just think that it's so beautiful. And another thing that is really, really cool, and I think is probably the biggest banger of all time, is the love version of this song. Back in like the 2000s, Cirque du Soleil wanted to do a Beatles love tribute thing with the Beatles music, and they made like remixes. Well, they didn't make them. George Martin actually made remixes and produced all the music for it with like previously done Beatles recordings. He didn't want to do like new arrangements or new orchestras or anything like that. He wanted to just reuse the remixes from different Beatles recordings. And so one of those versions was a remix of this song, Within You, Without You, and Tomorrow Never Knows, which is the coolest, funkiest, and just so crazy sounding songs of all time. I think that it's just so fantastic. I think that everybody after this should watch the Beatles, should listen to the Beatles Love album, because it's on Spotify, it's on Apple Music. It is so beautiful. Oh, and another thing, there's also like a remix of Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, Helter Skelter, and another song. I can't remember it though. Oh, and I Want You, She's So Heavy. It's just so freaking cool, and I definitely recommend you listen to that. But yeah, Within You, Without You. It's so beautiful. Like, there's a lot of philosophy within it, and it really makes you question your own being and how you think as a person. So I definitely recommend you listen to that. When I'm 64, this is one of Paul's many granny songs, as John Lennon would put it. There was like this point after the Beatles kind of broke up, or like during the Beatles ending and stuff like that, where John Lennon said that Paul McCartney only makes granny music, which it just sounds like really old-timey, especially with the songs Honey Pie, When I'm 64, Martha My Dear, You Gave Me the Answer, when he was in Wings. And actually Paul McCartney requested that this song was sped up so that he could sound younger, which is really cool. And I think that it does make him sound younger too, which is very interesting. It also features a trio of clarinets, which is really cool, because I think clarinets have such a beautiful sound. And I think of my best friend Madison Harvey, who gifted me this Sprynyl thing here. I think of her when I hear that, because she played clarinet when we were in band together. So that's just all I think of when I hear that. Paul actually wrote this when he was 14 years old, writing it when rock and roll was just about to happen, so it sounds very vaudeville in a way. It almost kind of sounds like it's trying to reach rock and roll, but it's just not there, you know what I mean? So it's really cool that he's taking inspiration from his younger self, who, like, already at the time at 14 was already doing all this crazy stuff with music. And I think that that's very beautiful. And it's just like, it's very simple with like a bum, 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 bum. And I love bouncy songs. I think you all know that when I talk about bouncy songs like that. So it's very interesting, and I love hearing that, and it's very prominent in this. The harmonies are really cool too. Like, they're kind of like Strawberry Fields sounding with the harmonies, which is really cool. It's just a sweet little timeless song, and I think it's cute for like older couples and stuff like that. It's just really cute. Lovely Rita. Quite literally a song about Paul getting a ticket outside of Abbey Road Studios. And it's just like kind of interesting sounding. Like, the harmonies are so beautiful, especially with that bass. That bass is like so bubbly sounding. I don't even know how you describe that, but the bass is just so bubbly with the doo 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 doo. It's just so good. And the harmonies are like so, oh, they're just so beautiful. They're so nice. They actually made handmade kazoos for this song. I don't even know like how you describe that. And it says online that like Ringo and like George are credited as playing the tissue paper because they made the kazoos out of combs and tissue paper, which is just so funny. It's just really funny that it's just credited as that. But you wouldn't even like think that it was made of combs and tissue paper when you hear the kazoos in this song. It's very, very vaudeville, especially the piano, which was played by George Martin. You can understand why George Martin is considered to be the fifth Beatle, considering he's played like almost every single one of these tracks on here. But yeah, Lovely Rita is very sweet, very Paul. Like, it's just so sweet, and it's just like so up in the open in a way. Good morning, good morning. This is a very Pet Sounds sounding song to me. Like, when I think of songs off this album, obviously there's a lot of Pet Sounds influences to it, but Good Morning is the most Pet Sounds sounding song off this album. That's a tongue twister. Say that 3 times fast. This song actually came to John Lennon when he was watching a Kellogg's commercial, and he not now, but back then, he considered this song to be a piece of garbage and a throwaway, but I think it's one of the best songs off this album, and probably one of his best songs on this album, especially. It very much reminds me of the chalk paintings from Mary Poppins, like as if they're in the Punting on the Thames drawing, which is the one they go into. Why do I know that? I'm a huge Mary Poppins fan. But yeah, it really reminds me of that, especially with I just love how it's just so different, and it changes, and it's all over the place, and there's time changes in it. It's just really, really cool. Like, the tempo is just all over the place, and the drums are really prominent, almost like in Glass Onion on the White Album. It's very reminiscent of that, even though this came before Glass Onion on the White Album. I just think that it's so funny that there's animal noises, like chickens and dogs and horses and cats, and that's actually very inspired from the last song off of Pet Sounds, which is Caroline No, which is my favorite song off that album of all time. So it's very nice. It just reminds me of Mary Poppins, and I just think it's really cool, and especially when there's a horn blaring and there's dogs going, that really reminds me of Mary Poppins too. It's just really cool. And then there's a reprise of Sgt. Pepper, and it is... My cat's in here. Hello. Sorry about that. But yeah. What? Sorry, my cat's in here. So you might hear meowing, like I said in the beginning. But yeah, it's a reprise of Sgt. Pepper, and it's just really freaking cool. And it's just like, we hope you enjoyed the show. We're once again self-aware of this. And what's really cool about this is I really like it when Paul counts in the songs. Like, he does it in I Saw Her Standing There. He does it in Smile Away off of Ram, which I talked about the last time. And it's also very reminiscent of, he does it on another one. He also does it on Now and Then, the last ever Beatles song, except he doesn't count to 4, he counts to 2. It's just so upsetting. Oh my gosh, it's so crazy. But yeah, I just think that's really cool, and I just really like the Sgt. Pepper's One and Only Lonely Hearts Club Band. Like, that's just so good. It just melts in your mouth when you say it. It's just so good. And then it transitions into A Day in the Life the last song off this album, and I would consider it to be one of the greatest Beatles songs of all time. Also one of my favorites. I think this is the most avant-garde sounding Beatles song of all time. I know that a lot of these songs are very avant-garde, but I would say this is the most avant-garde of all time. It's John Lennon singing about a car crash, and McCartney is also, in the middle part, Paul McCartney is recalling his life waking up, getting ready, having a smoke, and riding the bus. It's just kind of interesting because in between that time, between John's verse and Paul's verse, is that there's these instruments building up, and it sounds crazy, and I would actually consider that part of the song to be like when the Twister is taking Dorothy's house in The Wizard of Oz. I always bring it back to The Wizard of Oz or like something like that in these shows. It's so crazy, but that's just what I think of when I hear it. So it's really cool. And like all these instruments are like building up, the dynamics are changing, and then finally, boom. And then it goes to this piano. It's like do, 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 do. And there's an alarm going off, and Paul's like, woke up, got out of bed, dragged the comb across my head. And then he's like talking about his life, and then all of a sudden he goes, and suddenly I spoke and I went into a dream. And then it goes into either Paul or John just going into like these vocals, and he's saying ah and all that. It is actually, nobody knows if it's Paul or John singing that part, which is very interesting. But I think it's John singing that part. But if you listen really closely, you kind of think about it, and it's like, they both kind of sound alike there. This song was actually banned off the BBC with its song lyric, "I love to turn you on," which apparently is a drug reference. I think it's more of a sexual influence reference than anything. Paul McCartney actually wanted the orchestra to play random notes all at once, and they can either start like as slow as possible or as fast as possible. But the orchestra, they're so used to like having set direction that they were just like, what do we do here? So then George Martin told them to just play from their lowest note to their highest note at a set amount of bars. So they just did that. And that part where Paul does his part, that's actually one of the biggest influence for Electric Light Orchestra's song Mr. Blue Sky, which is really cool. If you hear those parts like simultaneously, then you'll hear it and you'll be like, wow, this really is a day in the life. That's so crazy. So yeah, it also goes back into that orchestra where they're like going from their lowest to their highest again, except there's no verse. All of a sudden, it's an ending crescendo which lasts 40 seconds, and it's multiple pianos playing the same note for 40 seconds. And it's literally like one of the longest notes probably ever. But after the end of that crescendo of this crazy freaking album that you've just listened to from 1967 by these 20-year-olds who were just high the whole time, and also playing these random freaking like genre stuff, and then it goes into like this weird like sounding thing. It's just like a jumble of words and like stuff like that, and it's very eerie and it's very scary, and I always skip it, but it's just like that's the ending of it. And like I said, with like the orchestra tuning up at the very beginning, it's kind of like the end of them tuning up, and it's like a circle almost. It's almost like we're gone full circle with that. And it's like never ending, and it's very avant-garde, this song, and it's very, very freaking amazing. And it is so, I'm in awe of this album, honestly. There's a reason why it's like one of my favorites, and I feel like we need like, I think we do get a lot of Sgt. Pepper stuff, like for media, for Beatles fans, but I don't think that we have enough, personally. So I want more Sgt. Pepper stuff, please. But yeah, this is one of my favorite albums of all time, and yeah, it's just so beautiful, and it's so out there, and it's kind of weird for me to listen to it now and like try to like give my analysis of it, because this has just been such an integral part of my life that I don't even think about it now. But there's people who haven't listened to this album yet, and I think that their mind will be absolutely blown when they listen to it, because it's just so, it's so star-striking. Like, it's just amazing that way. It's so beautiful, and it's so out there, and this is like a huge thing in pop culture, and why we have so many things that we do when it comes to music is because of this album. So, anyway, coming up after the break, we're going to be talking about my final thoughts of the album, and what I'm talking about next week. So don't forget that you can follow us on social media at DCSA Media Hub. You can follow me on Instagram at Alex Spry, and you can follow this show on Instagram at Sprynyl. So, we'll be back in a second. Welcome back to the Sprynyl Birthday Month Special finale here with Alex Spry, where I just finished talking to you about my favorite Beatles album of all time, Sgt. Pepper's Lonely Hearts Club Band by the Beatles. So, this is the final part of the episode where I just kind of tell you my final thoughts and what I'm doing the next time on Sprynyl. What I should probably tell everybody is that for the month of July, I am being switched to Wednesdays at 2 p.m. to Mondays at 2 p.m. on riotradio.ca. This is only for July, and then in August, I will be back to your regular scheduled program for Wednesdays at 2 p.m. on riotradio.ca. So, just keep that in mind, people. So I haven't really said anything about that on social media yet, but hopefully the fellas at Riot Radio will figure out all of their technical issue stuff. I should be back for Monday at Monday, July 7th. But I don't know, it's still very much up in the air, but I will keep everybody up to date on my social medias at Sprynyl on Instagram and at Alex Spry on Instagram as well. So any questions about that, just DM me, or any requests that you have for Sprynyl, please DM me. I will not bite, I promise. So what are my final thoughts of this album? Well, obviously, it's a part of the Sprynyl Birthday Month Special of my favorite albums of all time. This is one of my favorite albums of all time by the Beatles. It very much goes back and forth with Abbey Road and Sgt. Pepper, but this always comes on top for me because it's just so full of life and so different and so just out there, and I love that, and I love how different it is because of that. So my favorite songs off this album are Being for the Benefit of Mr. Kite, A Day in the Life, She's Leaving Home, and Within You Without You. So, what am I discussing next time on Sprynyl? Well, I am going to be talking about 10 by Pearl Jam, and I'm very excited to talk about that. And that will be dedicated to my dad, because his birthday was the other day, and I wish that I could have done something like for the actual coming up for the birthday and stuff like that, but I'm gonna do that. So I'm gonna be doing 10 by Pearl Jam in honor for my dad's 59th birthday. So happy birthday, Dad. So thank you so much for being such a constant support for Sprynyl, and for being here and loving and watching the Sprynyl Birthday Month Special. It has been such a blast, and I am so happy that I got to talk about my favorite albums and having my mother on and getting to show off why I love these albums so much, and just to talk about my favorite hyperfixations, especially about Paul McCartney and the Wiggles with my mother, and Billy Joel, which was such a treat to talk about now that I'm kind of making up for that loss, not being able to see him in March. So it's really cool. And finally getting to talk about the Beatles, because this is my dream, to talk about the Beatles for all you lovely people out there. So in the end, the love you take is equal to the love you make. Don't forget that you can follow us on social media at DCSA Media Hub. You can follow me on Instagram at Alex Spry, and you can follow this show on Instagram at Sprynyl, and you can listen to this show with your ears on Spotify. This will be posted on YouTube, so hopefully you all enjoy watching this, and you can go back watching this however you want. Maybe I'll do this more often with some albums that maybe I don't think are right for Riot Radio, especially with more of like the abstract sounding ones and stuff like that. That way I have more time to really talk about all what I really want to say, because I only have an hour to really talk about my favorite stuff on Riot Radio. So who knows? Maybe this will be a thing. I don't know. Let me know. But yeah, I will see you next time on Sprynyl, where I talk about 10 by Pearl Jam. So thank you very much. Bye.